Parents, does it seem like it's more of a hassle to deal with your kids' school schedules these days, with more off days than you remember? A King 5 investigation finds that at many school districts across the state, the school year is changing.
The state has a minimum requirement for the number of days students must attend class. But Chris Ingalls shows you how school's out in many districts before they hit that minimum number.
You want an apple?
What time are you picking me up from Bobcat?
It looks like an average school morning in the Fuhrer house, right down to the peanut butter and jelly.
No crusts or with crusts today, I'm saying.
No crust.
Go get the other stuff.
But Wednesdays are no ordinary day.
Okay.
Third grader Darby heads for class at the usual time.
All right, bye. We'll be right back.
Bye. I won't be right back.
But her elementary school has an early release day. Complicating things, older sisters Bailey and Darby start class 2 hours late today.
I like it because you get to sleep in.
A working neighbor drops off her daughter.
Kind of a neighborhood effort to get everybody to school on Wednesdays. A lot of people like me started working from home.
Issaquah has 42 partial school days per year and 2 waiver days when teachers report to school but not students.
Definitely the kids could use more time in class learning.
School districts across the state are chipping away at one of the cornerstones of basic education. State law requires that each student receive 180 days of instruction every year. Since 2007, state-approved waivers of this law have quadrupled to an all-time high, according to analysis by the King 5 investigators. 40% of the state's 295 school districts have now peeled days off their school calendars, including Seattle with a 3-day waiver, Edmonds, North Shore, and Shoreline with 5 days each, and Federal Way with 7 days waived.
It recognizes that the legislature...
The State Board of Education, appointed by the governor, grants those waivers.
Why doesn't the school board say no to that?
Because we don't have unlimited power. If the legislature wants a waiver program that is used sparingly, that is only used in unique circumstances, that we're all for that, but that would require a change in the law.
The law says the Board of Education may grant waivers for the purposes of economy and efficiency. Districts can easily prove they save money with fewer school days. However, waivers are a backhanded redefinition of basic education, according to staff documents last year warning the board about the spike in waivers.
I believe you've hit on something worth investigating.
Worth investigating because of what the board sees as a bigger concern. It says that schools denied waivers could resort to an option that's more harmful to student learning.
We could reform the whole waiver process and it wouldn't do anything to change the dynamic of partial school days.
Here's why more districts are turning to partial school days. In Washington, there is no legal definition for a minimum school day. If the kids show up here in class for even 1 minute of instruction, the district can count that as a full school day. That's important because the district needs at least 180 school days each year to qualify for state funding.
These days, many districts schedule shorter school days by the dozen. Everett School District has 38 partial days at elementary schools after adding early release Fridays this year. Bellevue has the same number, 38. Lake Washington has 42 shorter days. North Kitsap has 38 partial days plus 5 waiver days. And South Kitsap logs 49 partial school days each year. Schools use shorter days and waivers for 2 purposes: parent-teacher conferences and professional development, teaching the teachers.
We have a lot of demands that have been put on educators with increasing rigor, with the integration of new technologies into teaching, new evaluation system.
Issaquah's superintendent says he understands the frustration of parents in his district, like the Fuhrer family. But he says state cuts make it more difficult to pay teachers to do their work outside of school hours.
And the real challenge is, where do you find the time to do that without adding additional days?
I'm not aware of other states that have used half-day closings in the way that you've described.
University of Maryland professor Dave Marcotte has studied education nationwide. He understands the budget pressures, but says there could be a cost that's paid in the classroom, especially by struggling students.
I have a prediction, certainly, that anytime you reduce the amount of time kids spend in school, test scores are going to go down. and the amount they go down is directly a function of how much time is lost.
It just seems like sometimes we should ask whether, should this continue? Is there a better way? Bye.
Bye.
Teachers and school administrators say there's one part of the law where there is no shortcut. Students must receive 1,000 hours of instruction each year, and all school districts certify that they do that. However, Dr. Marcotte and others told us there's really been no research on whether compressing that 1,000 hours into shorter days is harmful to student learning. In other words, can kids still make the grade? So all this change is happening in our schools really without any study of what the impact is on kids.
It would be nice to study it, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and somebody may head that way because there's a lot of looking into whether we should even increase the school year, and it's all about a matter of how do you pay for it, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Parents, you've probably noticed big changes to your children's school calendars over the past few years. Districts are replacing full school days with partial days.
Educators argue that funding cuts are behind these changes. But is that the whole story of why school's out? In his continuing series, Chris Ingalls investigates the ABCs of structuring your kids' class time.
Daily routine, plus it gets the fat dog out.
Sophie is leashed up and headed to school. Rachel Teodoro says too often the daily dog walk starts early.
There's just so many disruptions throughout the school year.
To pick up her children from an early release day.
I'm noticing a lot of times that my son will say, well, we didn't do anything today.
Elementary schools in Fife have 18 half-days or days off in which routine school hours are used for teacher training or student conferences.
Hey guys, how was school today? Good. Yeah. I just feel like they're getting shortchanged by the lack of time that they're having in the classroom.
Teodoro, a classroom volunteer and PTA president, wonders if schools have lost their focus.
What is it that they're doing on these days? It's almost like they shoo the kids out because they've got more important things to do as adults.
Half days, late starts, early releases. It's not just here in Fife. School districts all across the state are putting more partial school days in their schedules.
And I don't intend to discredit the importance of teachers working together or having professional development, but to put it into the student calendar and to carve it out of the student time is the injustice that is alarming to me.
Jamie Lund is an education analyst for the conservative Freedom Foundation in Olympia. He blames school boards and districts for negotiating teacher contracts that offer partial school days at a time when pay raises are scarce.
It's a very easy concession to make.
In this 2011 Tacoma Schools contract, striking teachers faced a nearly 2% pay cut. In their counteroffer, the teachers union asked the district to convert 4 full student days to 4 half days, which results in teachers working fewer hours in the classroom for the same pay.
Because like any employee, if you got to get paid the same for a lighter workload or a more convenient workload, that's a benefit.
It's not an attempt by teachers to work less.
The president of the state teachers union says the contract language is not about giving teachers a better deal.
Over the last couple of years, they cut $2.6 billion.
Mary Lindquist says cuts by lawmakers stripped away 3 days of state-funded training each year for every teacher that occurred outside of school hours. It's training, she says, is vital for modern-day teachers.
It could be in service on the new evaluation system. It could be professional development on new curriculum. It could be training on new instructional strategies.
In your journal.
She says it's now up to districts and teachers to find the time for state-required teacher development. Since the state no longer pays for it, districts are left to squeeze that work into the regular school calendar.
I don't think anyone likes the increased use of loss of instructional time for kids, but it's the only option we have when the state continues to underfund our schools.
And
Lund questions whether teachers are always using that time as intended.
who gets to tell the employee what to do during that time?
In this 2011 contract negotiation, Bellevue teachers rejected the proposal to allow the district or school leadership to direct the time on all Wednesdays, which is Bellevue's weekly early release day.
Any attempt to kind of do cookie cutter, do the same thing in every building and have everyone doing the same thing doesn't meet the needs of our students. Teachers often resist that.
Let me ask you this question.
Bellevue was one of the first districts to institute a weekly early release day more than a decade ago. It's hard to argue with the success of a district that just earned national recognition on Newsweek's list of best high schools. Other districts have followed suit with their schedules. Everett School District now has 38 partial days at elementary schools after adding early release Fridays this year. That number matches Bellevue's 38 early release days. Lake Washington has 42 shorter days. North Kitsap has 38 partial days plus 5 waiver days with no school at all. And South Kitsap logs 49 partial school days each year.
I do have concerns about half-days becoming institutionalized.
Executive Director Ben Rarick says the State Board of Education has watched this trend anxiously, worried about the impact the weekly disruptions could have on grades. He says the only way to get rid of them is through more funding from the state.
If nothing happens, I fear that the proliferation of half-days will continue.
I don't feel like there's a whole lot that happens on a half day, and it makes me really question where our educational system's going.
Chris Ingalls, King 5 News.
Even though lawmakers are trying to come up with more education money during a special session in Olympia, insiders doubt that it will have much impact on partial school days.
Chances are your kids are spending less time at school, not more, because districts are replacing full days with partial days.
Could these shorter school days be harmful to the grades of students, especially those already struggling in class? Chris Ingalls looks for answers in his continuing investigation, Schools Out.
Buses roll out, kids head out, and school empties out 75 minutes early. Friday in the Everett School District is the weekly early release day.
It's a very busy day. We have a lot of kids, a lot more kids, for sure.
The number of kids at Cascade Boys and Girls Club surges by 40% on Fridays. For its after-school program, the gym opens early for middle and high school kids. Upstairs, the computer room is flooded with younger children.
Whatever the school district does, it's our goal to be here when families need us to be here. To us, it's kind of been a scramble to make sure that we have enough staff, enough vans to transport all those kids.
The Boys and Girls Club, funded by donors, provides after-school supervision and homework time. Parents are thankful, but not always convinced that it makes up for the lost class time.
He's big into basketball, so this is how we practice.
Justine Locke, a single working mom, says her 7th grader is much more comfortable on the court than in the classroom. She says early release Fridays are hurting his science grade.
Their class time is cut by 15 to 20 minutes, and they're not available after school, the teachers. Science is a class where they have to be at school to be able to do their work. They need a lab, they need their lab partner, they need their teacher.
It isn't just here in Everett. School districts all across Washington have been replacing full school days with partial days, meaning kids like this are spending less time in class.
Everett added 26 early release Fridays just this school year. That's in addition to a dozen half-days already on the calendar for elementary school parent-teacher conferences. That's a total of 38 partial school days this year. It's the equivalent of almost 2 weeks of school.
Our job isn't so simple anymore. It's not just teaching basic reading and writing, it's teaching more complex skills.
These are Everett teachers.
So in this group of people right here, there's 130 years worth of teaching experience.
They say on Fridays, kids leave early, but teachers don't.
We spend that time really looking at our curriculum. We're looking at what we're doing, where our students are. We're looking at individual kids. We're looking at them as a group.
They use the Friday time after students leave for teacher collaboration, when teams of teachers fine-tune lessons and discuss individual students.
It's crucial. I'm a better teacher. I'm a harder working teacher. I know more. I'm taught every day by my colleagues.
Teachers say they already work long days, including unpaid hours, so they need dedicated collaboration time. But some experts do have concerns about that teacher time eating away at student class time.
It's most likely to have effects on kids who are poor and minority students. So those are the kids we worry most about.
Dr. Dave Marcotte is an education researcher. He warns that partial school days could hit hardest for the types of kids found any given day in the Boys and Girls Clubs.
Test scores will go down, especially for kids we might worry about most. That is, kids who are from low-income families and kids who are minority students.
But teachers argue the collaboration time helps them focus more on struggling students.
I would just tell those parents they have to trust that what we are doing is the best for their child because we're putting quality in.
Chris Ingalls, King 5 News.
Again, the Boys and Girls Club survived mainly on donations. Find out how you can support the Boys and Girls Club's after-school programs. Go to our website, king5.com. Tonight, another school district considers whether to replace dozens of full days with partial days. The King 5 investigators have been looking at shorter school days and whether grades suffer when school's out. King 5's Chris Ingalls continues his investigation from Kent.
In your journal.
Doing more with less time in the classroom. It sounds counterintuitive, but in the state's fourth largest school district, Kent, the district believes it can improve student grades.
Learning and collaboration time.
Tonight, a committee recommended the district begin a 2-hour weekly late start for students, time the teachers would use among themselves for collaborating on lessons.
That students learn more when teachers collaborate. The quality time in the classroom really makes a difference by the teamwork of the teachers.
School administrators say it's a struggle to work collaboration time into their current schedules. A middle school teacher described the impact that teacher collaboration had in one test.
And the results were awesome. I think almost 70% kids of the students now were passing order of operations from 25% before.
Kent is following a trend in Western Washington schools. In neighboring Auburn, students start an hour late each Monday. In the Tahoma and Highline districts, students are released 90 minutes early every Friday. Renton has a 90-minute late start on Fridays, and Puyallup has a 3-hour early release for elementary kids every Wednesday.
Asking for 30 Wednesdays late starts, that's an impact on our children's learning.
Some parents are alarmed by the prospect of losing 60 hours of class time each year.
You ought to consider the hours and the days that the kids get. I think the tail's wagging the dog here.
The Kent School District says its polling shows that about 50% of parents support these shorter school days for the purposes of teacher collaboration. Parents should probably expect some change to the school schedule next year here in Kent. However, the number of days that will be affected by this is still an open question, and that's something that will be decided by the school board. I'm Chris Ingalls in Kent.
Schools will have a harder time cutting back on the number of school days next year, and that includes the state's largest school district.
The King 5 investigators have been showing you how school's out early because of state-approved waivers from the legally required number of school days. King 5's Chris Ingalls reports on a sudden about-face in the waiver program.
So, we're going to come back into session.
At its regular meeting this month, the state school board did something almost unheard of. It rejected 6 applications by school districts looking for waivers, permission to legally shorten their school years.
No, can I ask a question? You voted no on all of them as a group.
Earlier this month, we reported how these waiver applications appear to be almost rubber stamped by the state school board. We reviewed 5 years worth of applications by about 150 different school districts. And in this entire batch, we found only 3 denials from the state school board. State law requires that each student receive 180 days of instruction each year. Since 2007, state-approved waivers of the law have quadrupled to an all-time high, according to analysis by King 5.
The waiver days are used for professional development.
Shauna Heath is Director of Curriculum for Seattle Schools, one of the 6 districts whose waiver wasn't approved. In Seattle, like many districts, students don't come to school on waiver days, but teachers do. Heath says the days are used for teacher development.
There are always new and innovative ways and techniques to hone anybody's craft. If you're a physician, you're getting ongoing training as you go along. It's the same with teachers.
Hey guys, how was school today? Good. Yeah.
Some parents and some education experts worry about the impact of reduced class time on student grades. Because of those concerns, the state board tightened the rules on the waiver program late last year. Seattle is providing additional data to the state that it hopes will convince the school board to approve its waiver request at its July meeting. Until then, parents, next year's Seattle school calendar is up in the air.
We have a start and a potential end time, and that's kind of where we're at right now until we find out whether or not these days need to be built into the calendar.
So it's a little bit complicated. Seattle wants 6 waiver days, 3 of them for parent-teacher conferences it will probably get. That's pretty standard. If it doesn't get the other 3 for that professional development time, that could get very expensive. The district might have to pay teachers for additional time or cut into classroom time like so many districts are doing with partial days, which we've told you about. That's happening really all over the state. So you really got to feel for the schools and the teachers here. This is a complicated thing to work out, and obviously Seattle's still working on it.
All right, Chris, thank you.
Sure.
The state's 4th largest school district has decided against a major change in next year's class schedule.
The Kent School Board turned down a plan to replace 30 full school days with half days.
It goes against the grain of many school districts in which schools out with dozens of shorter school days each year. In his continuing investigation, Chris Ingalls reveals that one person who wants to put a stop to all those short days is the state's top educator.
Look, my job is to be an advocate for kids.
The superintendent of Washington schools doesn't like what he sees. Classrooms that are empty, kids that are sent home one day each week before the traditional class time is over.
Especially the kids that struggle the most. It hurts them the most if we're not in the classroom teaching.
Superintendent Randy Dorn is a former teacher and longtime educator. He's wary of what has become common in many districts, sending kids home, clearing time for teachers to train and collaborate on lesson plans.
I think we do have to allocate more time for that to happen. Should we take it away from student time? To me, the answer is no.
Many educators blame years of cuts by the state legislature for the predicament that schools are in. In fact, lawmakers are in there right now in special session trying to find a way to send more money to schools. But Superintendent Dorn says money alone can't be an excuse for cuts in class time. Our Schools Out investigation shows that's just what districts are doing. We revealed that more districts are seeking waivers of the law that requires them to provide 180 days of school each year. The number of districts granted state-approved waivers jumped by 300% in just a few years, meaning those districts can shave 3, 5, even 7 days off the school calendar. Schools typically use waiver days when kids aren't in class for teacher collaboration on lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences.
The time is for teachers to decide how to use it.
Teachers say that time results in a higher quality education.
Our job isn't so simple anymore. It's not just teaching basic reading and writing, it's teaching more complex skills.
Districts also use partial days, late start or early release to carve out time for teachers. These are just some of the districts that have weekly short days built into their schedule.
I think it's a burden on parents that are working parents and have to do all the arrangement. So I don't like the idea of waivers. I don't like the idea of half days for professional development.
What will the superintendent do about it? He says next year he'll push for a law that would, for the first time in Washington, define the number of hours in a school day, likely 6 hours.
If there's 2 hours taken off a school day, to me it wouldn't count as a school day.
Dorn says districts shouldn't wait for more money. He says more should find time before or after a full class day for teacher training and collaboration.
I think some school districts are doing it, better use of their planning time and how you schedule.
Meeting with the other teachers.
The Kent School Board may be the latest example of that. After 2 years of study, a committee of school administrators recommended adding 30 late start Wednesdays to next year's calendar. But the school board turned that down, urging principals to find time for teacher collaboration in their existing schedules, more time for kids in class. The state superintendent thinks that's a lesson plan more districts should follow.
What I'm saying is, very bluntly, I believe that we should have kids going to school 180 days.
Chris Ingalls, King 5 News.
The state's largest teachers union says states' underfunding is causing the cuts in class time. The Washington Education Association says school districts have been forced to find creative solutions, and more half days is one of those solutions.
State lawmakers want to find out if our children are getting the most out of their school days. They've ordered a first-of-its-kind study on the typical school day. This follows our Schools Out investigations, which revealed shrinking school days and school years in Western Washington. Chris Ingalls has the continuing investigation.
House Bill 1988.
In an extended special session this year, much of the rancor focused on public education and how to pay for it. But lawmakers also want to know if we're giving kids the best schooling for our money. So in the final budget, they inserted this proviso, ordering an analysis of how school districts use school days, a study by state auditors.
We're interested in setting some standards for each day at school, how many hours you actually go. I get a lot of complaints from constituents about early release days. Why do they occur? Is there any predictability? Are there any standards?
You could be going to 295 school districts out there asking them questions about this.
We could be spending a lot of time on the road and visiting a lot of different places in the state, yes.
Keenan Konopaski is in charge of getting answers.
Often we get the question posed to us because it's hard to find an answer.
He runs the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee.
JLARC is the performance auditing entity for the state legislature, and the purpose of the office is to answer questions the legislature has about how government programs are performing.
Lawmakers have asked JLARC to find out how school districts define classroom time, how non-instructional hours are used, and the amount of time districts devote to class and non-class time each day.
Our first step is to go out and ask other people a lot of questions about how the program operates and what kinds of things they're actually doing when they entertain different hours of the day for student instruction.
Think in your journal.
Our Schools Out investigations have shown that many districts have added weekly short days to their calendars with late starts or early releases for students.
It recognizes that the legislature
And state school board approved waivers, which allow districts to legally shrink their school year, more than tripled in a few short years.
What does the teachers union think of this JLARC study?
You know, really, we're kind of neutral on it.
The president of the State Teachers Union is cautious because teachers spend that additional time when the class is empty for something they say is vital to a good education.
You know,
It gives them time for teacher collaboration.
It's everything from planning a lesson, taking a look at what worked, what didn't work. It's working with your fellow colleagues that are teaching in the same subject area. It's also being able to take a look at that individual student that needs that extra attention.
Lawmakers continue to cut state dollars that used to pay for teacher collaboration outside of class time. Teachers and administrators say no one likes cutting into instructional time, but
Absolutely, it results in a higher quality education.
that sparked the debate that JLARC may help answer. Is that lost class time harmful to student learning?
Parents want to see more accountability. They want their kids learning. They want them in class.
Studying nearly 300 different school districts is no small job. So JLARC will have about a year and a half to complete its work. It'll report back to the people in that building, lawmakers, in December of next year. In Olympia, Chris Ingalls, King 5 News.
Lawmakers also approved a separate, different study. It will be conducted by Central Washington University and will look into how teachers typically spend their day. Central is hoping to have some preliminary results in just a few months.